The day I found out my sister sold our house, I was sitting on the porch we used to play tag on. That's the first line that always replays in my head when I think back to that afternoon. The porch boards were sun-worn and soft under my feet, their paint peeling just like the edges of our childhood memories. I remember the smell of rain that morning clean, a little metallic, and the way the old wind chime above the door trembled in the breeze, playing its quiet song as if it knew what was coming before I did. It had been 3 months since I'd moved back home. After my job in the city fell apart and my lease ended, Naomi, my older sister, offered me a lifeline. "Wretch, you can come stay at the house," she'd said over the phone. Her voice was steady, careful, like she was trying not to sound too reluctant. It's still ours after all. Might as well be put to use. I'd taken her up on it without hesitation. I needed somewhere that didn't ask questions, somewhere I could breathe. And if I was honest, I missed home. The old Miles family house sat at the edge of Briarwood, a small town where everyone still waved at stop signs and gossip traveled faster than the mail. When I pulled into the driveway that first day, I half expected to see Mom standing by the kitchen window, her hair pinned up, apron still dusted with flour. But the curtains were drawn, the garden half wild, and the air carried that faint emptiness that lingers after a funeral years later, but somehow still present. Naomi had already moved out years ago, shortly after she married Daniel Turner. He was a real estate agent, confident, sharp smile, the kind of man who could sell snow to an Eskimo. I'd always thought he was too smooth for her, but Naomi liked certainty. Daniel was nothing if not certain. After their divorce last year, Naomi threw herself into work, managing accounts at a local bank. She was the kind of woman who pressed her lips before she spoke, always measuring what came out. Me, I was the opposite. Too many feelings, not enough filters. Maybe that's why we drifted apart over the years. Still, when she offered me the house, it felt like a sign of forgiveness of family. The first few weeks back were quiet, almost healing. I'd wake up early, make coffee in the same chipped mug Mom used to love, and sit by the window watching sunlight crawl across the faded floral wallpaper. I painted one of the spare bedrooms, cleaned out the attic, even started fixing the porch swing that had been broken since Dad's last summer alive. Some nights, I'd call Naomi. She always picked up, though sometimes I could tell she was distracted. "How's the house holding up?" she'd ask, flipping through papers or typing on her keyboard. "Better than I expected," I'd answer, smiling. "Feels like I'm bringing it back to life." She'd hum in approval, but never say much else. I figured it was her way caring without showing too much of it. A few of the old neighbors stopped by when they saw my car in the driveway. Mrs. Latham from across the street brought a basket of scones. "Didn't think I'd see another Miles back in this house," she'd said with a wistful smile. Neither did I thought. One evening, Naomi came by after work, dressed in her usual neat gray blazer and pale lipstick. She looked around the kitchen, her eyes skimming the small changes I'd made. The new curtains, the flowers on the table, the way I'd polished the old wood cabinets. "You've really made it cozy again," she said, pouring herself some tea. "Yeah. I thought maybe we could..." I hesitated. "Maybe we could both move in? Fix it up together? You know, like old times." Her hand froze on the mug. "I don't think that's a good idea, Rach. I've got my own place now. And honestly, this house, it holds too much." I nodded, pretending to understand. But a small ache bloomed inside me. It wasn't the house that held too much, it was her. After that night, she didn't visit again. By early spring, I'd settled into a rhythm. I took part-time work at a local bakery, walked to the market on Saturdays, even started a small vegetable patch out back. I'd send Naomi pictures sometimes the porch after I repainted it white, the tulips blooming by the fence, a photo of the old oak tree with the initials R+N carved into its bark. She never replied to those. Still, I told myself she was busy. We both were. Life doesn't always leave space for sentiment. Then one morning, a man in a collared shirt and khaki pants showed up at the door. "Morning, ma'am," he said, flashing a polite smile. "I'm just here to take a few photos of the property before the weekend." I blinked. "Photos? What for?" He glanced at his clipboard. "The listing, of course. For the open house." The words didn't register at first. "Open house?" I repeated, half laughing because it sounded absurd. "Yes, ma'am. The place on Maple Drive. This is 214, right?" I stepped onto the porch. The sunlight suddenly too sharp, too revealing. "There must be a mistake," I said. "This house isn't for sale." He frowned, flipping through his notes. "Says here it's under Turner Realty. Seller is Naomi Turner. My stomach dropped. I tried to laugh again, but my voice cracked in the middle. Naomi Turner is my sister. He gave me a polite, confused look, the kind you give someone who doesn't know they're standing in the middle of their own storm. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. You might want to call her. When his car pulled away, I just stood there on the porch, frozen. The wind picked up, and the old chime began to ring again, soft and broken, like it was mocking me. I went inside, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. I called Naomi. She didn't pick up. I called again. Then again. By the fourth time, she answered. Rachel, what's wrong? Her tone was flat, like she already knew. I swallowed hard. Are you selling the house? Silence. Then, softly, so soft I almost missed it, she said. It's complicated. Her words. It's complicated hung in the air like smoke. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. Naomi, someone just came by to take pictures for an open house. They said you listed it. On the other end, I heard her take a slow breath. I meant to tell you, she said quietly. I've been in talks with the realtor for a while now. It just happened faster than I expected. I laughed, but it came out sharp. You meant to tell me. Naomi, I live here. I know, Rachel. I know. But the taxes, the upkeep, it's too much. I've been paying for years. You're not working full-time, and so you just decided to sell it without even asking me? She sighed. That long practice sigh she used whenever she thought I was being unreasonable. You don't understand the financial side of things. This was the smart move. I wanted to say more, but something inside me went still. Cold. The kind of stillness that comes when you realize the ground beneath you isn't what you thought it was. Naomi, I said softly. This isn't just a house. I know, she said again. But it's done. The paperwork's signed. Closing's in a few weeks. My knees gave out, and I sank into one of Mom's old dining chairs, the one she used to sit in while grading her students' papers. I stared at the floral tablecloth I'd picked out just a month ago. My hands were trembling. Naomi, how could you? But she'd already hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through every room like a ghost, retracing its own steps. The creak in the hallway floor, the smell of old cedar from Dad's study, the faded marks on the doorway where Naomi and I used to measure our height each summer. This wasn't just real estate. This was the map of our childhood, and now it was being erased. I tried to tell myself there had to be a mistake, that Naomi would come to her senses, that she'd fix it. But the next morning, a for sale sign was staked in the front yard. Bright red. Bold. Final. The neighbors started whispering by afternoon. Mrs. Latham from across the street came by again, her brow furrowed. I didn't think you were moving, dear, she said. I'm not, I murmured, staring at the sign. Apparently, my sister is. She pursed her lips but said nothing, just patted my arm before walking away, her silence heavier than any judgment could have been. Over the next few days, I called Naomi again and again. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she didn't. When she did, her tone was clipped, businesslike. It's already in escrow, she told me once. You don't need to worry about the details. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of, like I was some stranger she owed a courtesy, not her own sister. Finally, I drove to her office. She looked surprised to see me standing there in the doorway, hair unwashed, face pale, still wearing the flannel shirt I'd painted in the week before. Rachel, she said under her breath, standing up quickly. This isn't the place. No, Naomi, I interrupted. This is exactly the place. Because apparently, this is where you make all your decisions now, without me. A few coworkers glanced our way before she led me into a small conference room. Can we please not do this here? She asked quietly. Then tell me why, I said, my throat tight. Tell me how you can just sell the only piece of Mom and Dad we have left. Her expression softened for a second, just a second. You think I wanted to do this? You think I don't lie awake at night remembering that kitchen? The smell of Dad's coffee? But we can't live in the past forever. I need to move forward. And what about me? She hesitated. You'll find another place, Rachel. I'll help you with the deposit. But I can't keep carrying this house. I shook my head. You didn't carry it alone. I took care of it. I lived there. She folded her arms. And that's exactly why I didn't want to tell you. I knew you'd take it personally. I stared at her, searching for some trace of the sister I'd grown up with. The one who used to braid my hair before school, who cried with me the night Mom died. But all I saw now was someone polished, distant, and tired of me. You already sold it, didn't you? I whispered. Her silence told me everything. That weekend, I started packing. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Every object I touched felt like a goodbye. Mom's favorite teacup, the blanket Dad used to throw over the couch, the photo of Naomi and me at the county fair, faces sticky with cotton candy, hands clasped tight. I'd left the box of keepsakes for last. In it, I found an old letter in Dad's handwriting as will, written before his heart gave out the summer after Naomi's wedding. I'd forgotten it even existed. As I unfolded the brittle pages, my breath caught. The house, he'd written, was to remain in both our names until both daughters agreed to sell. Not one, both. I felt the room tilt slightly, like gravity had shifted. Naomi hadn't just betrayed me, she'd broken the law. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. The clerk, an older man, with reading glasses sliding down his nose, searched the property file for me. Looks like it was sold through Turner Realty, he said after a few moments. Closing date set for the end of the month. Buyers already signed. Can I see the documents? He hesitated, then shrugged. They're public record. He handed me a thin folder. My eyes scanned the pages until they landed on the signature line. Seller, Naomi Turner. Co-owner consent. Blank. I stared at it, the edges of the paper blurring as anger rose in my throat. My sister hadn't just lied. She'd forged a future without me in it. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the wind howling outside. I laid the letter and the deed side by side, the past and the present staring back at me, like mirror images. I didn't know what to do yet. I only knew one thing. Naomi wasn't going to erase me this easily. Not from our house. Not from our history. I didn't sleep that night. The house creaked inside around me, the way it always did when the temperature dropped. But instead of comfort, each sound felt like an accusation. Bedown, I'd made my decision. If Naomi wanted to play business, then I'd treat this like business. No more emotional calls, no pleading. I drove straight to the small office in town, the same one Dad used years ago when he drafted his will. The receptionist gave me a sympathetic look when I mentioned my last name. Miles, right? Your father was a good man, she said, before ushering me into an office with scuffed bookshelves and a sleepy golden retriever at the lawyer's feet. Mr. Reynolds, gray-haired, slow-talking. The kind of man who still used a fountain pen, listened quietly as I explained everything. She sold the property without your consent? He asked, brows furrowing. Yes, I said, sliding him both the will and the property deed. Dad's will clearly states it can't be sold unless both of us agree. She didn't even tell me. I found out from a stranger. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages. Then he nodded slowly. This is binding. If the buyer hasn't taken possession yet, there's room to challenge the sale. My chest lifted, just slightly. So, I can stop it? Potentially. We'll need to file an injunction right away. He gave me a list of documents to gather bank statements, tax receipts, proof of joint ownership. I left the office feeling something I hadn't in days. Purpose. That afternoon, I went back to the house and started collecting papers. Naomi's name was on every bill, but half the checks were mine. Electricity, maintenance, even a few months of taxes after Dad's passing. I had proof. Still, part of me hesitated. I didn't want to turn this into a war. She was my sister. But then I remembered her voice on the phone. It's complicated. Complicated didn't excuse betrayal. By evening, I'd gathered everything into a thick folder and called Naomi. She answered on the second ring. Rachel, please don't start again. I spoke to a lawyer. Silence. Then, you what? You broke Dad's will, Naomi. You sold the house without my consent. That's illegal, and you know it. She exhaled sharply. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I'm filing an injunction. The sale isn't final yet, and I'm going to stop it. I could almost hear her pinching the bridge of her nose, the way she always did when she thought I was being dramatic. Rachel, listen to yourself. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You always overreact. You cling to things that are already gone. My voice wavered, but I steadied it. Maybe. But this time, I'm clinging to what's rightfully mine. Before she could respond, I hung up. The following week was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Mr. Reynolds filed the injunction, and I received confirmation that the sale was temporarily frozen pending review. It was a small victory, but it gave me air again. Still, the news traveled fast in Briarwood. By Friday, the whispers had started. Did you hear? The Miles sisters are fighting over the house. Such a shame, after all their parents did for them. I kept my head down at work, pretending not to notice. But inside, shame and anger twisted together like vines. One evening, as I was locking up the bakery, I saw a familiar figure waiting outside. Naomi. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back too tightly, dark circles under her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I saw the woman beneath the armor. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked to the park across the street, where the benches were half buried under fallen leaves. "I never wanted it to get this far," she began. "But you left, Rachel. For years. You didn't call. You didn't visit. I handled everything. Mom's hospital bills, the taxes, the insurance. I was drowning, and the house was the only thing left, tying me to that pain." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, my anger softened. "I know," I said quietly, "but that doesn't make it right to erase me." She looked away. "I didn't mean to erase you. I just needed to move on. Every time I drove past that porch, I saw them. I couldn't breathe." We sat in silence, the wind rustling through the trees. "Naomi," I said finally, "you could have told me. We could have sold it together. You didn't have to go behind my back." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I was afraid you'd stop me." "I would have," I admitted, "but at least we would have been honest with each other." She nodded slowly, wiping her face. "What happens now?" "I'm not backing down," I said gently but firmly. "The court will decide." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she stood, clutching her purse tightly. "I hope you know what you're doing, Rach, because once this goes public, there's no taking it back." She walked away before I could reply. The next morning, a letter arrived from Turner Realty. The buyer was pulling out due to complications with ownership. I sat on the porch with the letter in hand, the morning sun breaking through the clouds. For the first time in weeks, I felt the house breathe with me again. But I also knew this wasn't over. Naomi would come back, maybe with lawyers, maybe with apologies. I didn't know which. All I knew was that this house, our house, had become more than just wood and brick. It was a battlefield, and neither of us was walking away unscarred. When word got out that I'd filed an injunction against my sister, Briarwood turned into a whispering town. Every grocery store line, every coffee shop table seemed to pause when I walked by. Some people offered sympathetic smiles. Others avoided eye contact altogether. In small towns, family feuds weren't private. They were entertainment. Naomi didn't speak to me again after that night in the park. But I started hearing her side of the story from everyone else. "She's just trying to move on. She carried all the weight after your parents died." "You really think it's about money?" I wanted to shout that it wasn't, that this was about betrayal, about respect, but the truth was more complicated than that. Because somewhere in my chest, guilt had started to bloom. I had left. I'd chosen my own life in the city. I hadn't been there when Mom was sick, when Dad started forgetting names, when the house grew quiet except for the sound of Naomi trying to hold it all together. But that didn't mean she had the right to erase me from it entirely. A week later, Mr. Reynolds called. "The hearing's been scheduled," he said. "It'll be brief, mostly procedural, but it's your chance to show the judge you were never consulted." The idea of standing in court against my own sister made my stomach turn, but I agreed. When the day came, the courtroom was cold and sterile, its fluorescent lights humming faintly. Naomi sat on the opposite bench, wearing a navy blazer that made her look every bit the composed professional. She didn't look at me once. Her lawyer, a sharp woman in her 40s, stood to speak first. "Your Honor, my client acted within reason, believing her sister had relinquished all interest in the property by moving out permanently and contributing nothing financially for over 5 years." I clenched my hands in my lap. That wasn't true, and she knew it. Mr. Reynolds rose next. Slow but steady. "Your Honor, the will explicitly requires joint consent. Regardless of distance or assumption, one party cannot unilaterally sell shared property. The sale is therefore invalid without Miss Rachel Miles' agreement." The judge, an older man with a kind but firm expression, studied the documents for what felt like hours. Then he looked up. "I'll need time to review," he said finally. "Until then, the injunction stands. No sale, no transfer of ownership." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a loss either. That evening, I went home and found a letter taped to my door. It was from Naomi. Her handwriting, still neat and looping, just like when we were kids, filled a single page. "Rachel, I can't keep fighting you. This isn't what I wanted. I thought I was freeing us both, but maybe I only freed myself. I'm sorry for breaking your trust, but I can't undo what's already been done. If you want to keep the house, keep it. I'll sign whatever I need to, but I can't go back there again. Not after everything. Naomi." I read the note 3 times, Then I sank to the floor and cried not out of anger, but from the hollow ache of understanding. She hadn't done this out of greed. She'd done it out of grief. And I'd spent weeks turning that grief into ammunition. A month later, the court finalized its decision. Naomi had violated the will's terms, but since she'd withdrawn from the sale and agreed to transfer her share, no further action was required. The house was mine, legally, fully, finally. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty. The rooms that once echoed with laughter and Sunday dinners now felt too quiet. Every corner carried ghosts, Mom's humming, Dad's footsteps, Naomi's distant laughter drifting from the porch. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found the old wall calendar still hanging there, turned to March 2018. The last date marked in red read Mom's chemo appointment. I reached up and took it down, folding it carefully before placing it in a box labeled Memories. Then I made a decision. 2 months later, I put the house up for sale myself this time, not out of spite, but out of peace. I called Naomi the morning it listed. She didn't answer, but I left a voicemail. Hey, it's me. I wanted you to know I'm selling the house, but I'm doing it the right way this time, openly. I thought maybe, if you ever want to come by before it's gone, you can. No lawyers, no fighting, just us. She never called back, but 2 weeks later, I found fresh flowers on the porch steps. White lilies, her favorite. No note, no message. But I didn't need one. When the sale closed, I took one last walk through the house. The sunlight streamed through the front windows, painting golden lines across the floor. I traced my hand along the banister, where Dad used to pause before heading upstairs. Then I whispered softly, "Thank you for everything." As I stepped outside, I glanced back one final time, and for just a second, I swore I saw the shadows of all of us there. Mom laughing in the kitchen, Dad fixing that stubborn hinge, Naomi leaning on the doorframe, rolling her eyes at me. And then, like dust in the morning light, they faded. I didn't lose my sister in court. I lost her long before that, somewhere between grief and silence. But maybe, just maybe, selling that house was the only way either of us could finally go home again.